LACP is definitely like my second home and my first home when it comes to photography. So I'm always thrilled to be part of this family, which is just great. So Shamayim, welcome. This is really
Yeah.
awesome. You know, it's so cool. I mean, since this began, I've been looking over your website and getting to know you really through digital. And I love your work and I love your background. And then talking to your studio manager the other day, you inspired me even before I started talking to you. So, and we're going to get into that. I think it was just really amazing. So the one thing that I just want to ask is, I'm going to hand the reins over to you, but if every once in a while, if I want to throw in a couple words or ask a question while we're going along, that's cool with you?
Absolutely.
I think everything's great. So before we get going, being a nice Jewish boy that I am, I'm Shamayim, Hebrew
Mhm.
word for heaven. How did all that happen? Tell me what's going
Uh,
on.
well, I am the product of a mother that's an Aquarius. So my mother is very, very like inspired by a lot of different cultures, spirituality practices, and things like that. And so my family originally followed the path of um, Hebrew Israelites. And so in our culture, names are so important. So usually our names are chosen for us based upon the trajectory of the purpose that our family would like for us as the children to go into. And it just so happened that, because I get told this a lot in Miami and then living in Williamsburg in Brooklyn, I have had so many Jewish neighbors and they were like, you know, your name is Hebrew, right? And I'm like, yes. And they were like, you know, that's not a name, right? It's a word. And I was like, well, hello, it's a name now. So yeah, I'm familiar.
Hmm. So with that, when you say your name sort of dictates the direction that you're supposed to go in life,
Hmm.
was photography on the radar or was that something else?
It was, and I didn't know. I've always had a camera in my hand. Always. My grandmother always has to remind me that she bought me my first camera. It was a Kodak Easy Saver, a little disposable camera, and then she bought me like a 16 millimeter little camera to take pictures of birds. But no, my first path was to be a zoologist.
Oh, wow.
I'm obsessed with animals.
Mhm.
And then my mother told me, she was like, you can't be a zoologist. And I'm like, why would you just destroy my dream? And she was like, because zoologists don't make money. And she was like, I'm your mother. You need a lot of money. So she was like, you need to be a veterinarian. They make money. So then I wanted to be a veterinarian. Then I found out that I don't want to be dealing with sick animals and dying animals. And so, yeah, it just kept shifting all the way from there to wanting to own a club when I was in high school. Because if it wasn't animals, I love beautiful women. I just loved being around beautiful women for
Man.
ever since I was a little kid. Like I would always find like that pretty friend of my older sisters and I would just hang around them. And so I actually had an art instructor in high school named Miss Kirkpatrick, who was Jewish. She always had to remind me that. And she told me that I would never be good at art because I like cheesecake art. And to her, cheesecake art was the fact that I like to draw beautiful women. I only
Mhm.
wanted to draw animals and beautiful women all the time in art class. And she was like, "You'll never be a good artist because beautiful women, they're not inspirational. Nobody cares about." And I was just like, "Oh, okay. Thanks, Miss Kirkpatrick." Only to find out that I was still leading up into becoming a photographer. It wasn't drawing. She was right. I
Right.
would not have made it very famous if I just drew beautiful women. So I took
Got
pictures
it.
of them. But where my name came back into it is my father's name means bright fame.
Mhm.
And he wanted me named after him. And I did not want to be famous. I went through this whole entire period after 2005 where I took a spiritual journey and I traveled to 4 different countries. And I left my religion at home before I went on this trip because I wanted to walk and break bread with people from all different kinds of areas. And so in 2005 to 2006, during that year, I met with atheists, agnostic, different Native American, Indigenous American, um, nations, Catholics, went to synagogues, went to mosque throughout a whole year. And I found God throughout all of these walks of life, even with the atheist. I was like, yeah, I hear you. You don't believe in God, but you do. And it was just interesting to see the common thread of belief in something higher than ourselves throughout all of these people.
Right.
And I wanted to incorporate that early on because 2005, when I went on that spiritual journey, I went out to the desert of Sedona at the end in Arizona and almost fainted from heat exhaustion. But when I came to, something clicked in my brain and I just came out of that desert and I was like, I want to be a fashion photographer. Very specific.
Yeah,
I didn't want to be a wedding photographer. I don't care about taking pictures of Nana next to the cake. I didn't want to do events. I didn't even care about celebrities. All I wanted to do was be a fashion photographer. And the girl who I was dating at the time, she was a model, but she was like a local model and beautiful, super classy, came from a very rich family. And all of her pictures look over sexualized to me. And I was like, why do you keep taking pictures like this? Your dad owns a bank. I'm like, why do you have to take sexy pictures? And she was like, well, that's the only way that they like to photograph Black women. And I was like, what are you talking about? There's Naomi Campbell out there. There's Tyra Banks. And she was like, who else? And I was like, oh, I can't think of anybody else. And she was like, because no one wants to photograph us to look like the women in the high fashion magazines. They only wanted to see like the glamorized, super sexy, like Maxim magazine type stuff. And it didn't make sense to me. So after that journey, I went and got like this, I can't take credit. My mother went and got me this Olympus camera. I don't even remember, it was an E something. She constantly reminds me that she was the one to buy me my first professional camera. So I took that camera and I started taking pictures of my girlfriend at that time. And the first thing she said to me, she was like, you see the God in me. And it triggered the meaning behind my name. I was like, out of all of this, I come right back around to spirituality and my family. And so it's always been a part of my agenda and my mission to try to see the God in all of my subject matters, even when it's very difficult. And it's becoming very hard to find that nowadays, especially with social media and everybody just wanting to, I feel like, just blatantly, like, trying not to use any bad words, just put themselves out there. I'm just gonna say it like that. And they don't care how they do it because I feel like we're so obsessed with attention now that we'll do anything for it. So, but yeah, all of that just to go back around to, I came back into finding God in my work, hence reflecting the name.
That's amazing. And before we get into you showing off your work, there's sort of a segue I want to take is you have a very vibrant color palette that you work with. Typically just the images that I've seen. Where did that come from?
So interesting that you say that because the majority of my career, my brand has been around monochromatic black and white images. It was not until the new year of 2000 when I was out in Aswan. No, it wasn't Aswan. It was another desert outside of Cairo in Egypt. And I was freezing. It's super cold in the desert. We were out there New Year's Eve, my models team, and I almost froze to death in that night. And when I got up in the middle of the night and I just started walking in the desert to think, and I started seeing in color. It was the weirdest thing. But anyone who followed my work from all the way back 15, 16 years ago, they were like, you black and white is your thing. In 2019, I started seeing in color. And I started appreciating color, especially when it came to studying color theory, studying the symbology of color throughout different cultures and through different spiritual practices, learning about the colors of the chakras, Kundalini colors, all this kind of stuff. So I started seeing them and appreciating them. And I found that they assisted me with telling a narrative that black and white just didn't do.
Right.
So before I fell in love with shadows and light, because all of my favorite artists like Rembrandt and all of the classics use one single light, and I've only used one single light my entire career, even in studio. And I just love the shadows. And I felt like the stories were based upon the shadows until 2020. Then I was like, the color has something to say. So I wait for the image to tell me if it wants to be in color or in black and white now.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. All right, I'm going to step back, go for it, and show you. It's all you.
Okay.
Press the buttons, and then every once in a while, you may hear me chime in. Otherwise, we'll have a nice talk afterwards, and then open it up to the house.
Okay.
Okay.
As I mentioned to you all, I put together a really beautiful presentation that I cannot seem to put up. But so what I did was I took the images from the presentation that I had and I put them onto a slideshow page on my website, which I'll show them to you. And so I went about selecting the images based upon my followers on Instagram. I asked them which images would they like for me to explain when I met with you all today. And so they chose several. And I can break down the philosophy behind them, if that works. Because I'm not a technical photographer. Never have been. I have so many photographers around me and they just know so much about everything, every button, I don't know. I keep some really smart assistants next to me who can tell me all about the latest and greatest stuff. So for photographers, especially new photographers that are watching this series right now, before I even show my work, I would like to explain process. I'm very minimalist. In studio, I use one singular light source. So it's very rare that I'll use more than one. So any of the studio work that I'm about to show is just using one light source because I'm trying to replicate the sunlight in a studio. And we're on Earth, we're not on Tatooine. So we only have one sun. So I try to replicate that one sun at my choice time of day, which is usually around noon, because I wasn't formally trained. I didn't know that you were supposed to not shoot in the middle of the day. So most of the lighting that you see in my photography that from my location shoots are all in the middle of the day, like noontime, because I never learned that was a bad thing. So I didn't have that rule. And I was, from the very beginning, I was trying to replicate high fashion photography, editorial photography, which uses a lot more dramatic lighting. And I was only able to get those deep shadows and those bright whites by shooting in the middle of the day. I've started now progressing towards the end of the day, but most of this stuff is in the middle of the day. So I will share my screen now. So this image was the image that pretty much changed the trajectory of my career. Just to make sure that we're all looking at the same thing, it should be two models in front of the Great Pyramids of Giza.
Yes.
I say that this one changes the trajectory of my career because up until that point, I was traveling all around the world just trying to create dynamic images. But it wasn't until this one that got recognized by Condé Nast Publications, which was my dream because it's, of course, home to Vogue. And as a fashion photographer, we always, our wet dream is always to shoot for Vogue. This image did not necessarily get Vogue, but it did get a very big magazine next to it, which is Harper's Bazaar. So after that, I was contacted by Time Magazine, where they did a wonderful interview about me, my process, my philosophy, and that also changed my career tenfold. This image was taken back in 2015, my first trip to Egypt. I wasn't even thinking about trying to create like image that was going to be like defining my career. I was just trying to show my viewers my dreams of Egypt because I felt like I was going back home when I went there. Had a team all from the United States of America. Everybody flew out with me to Egypt. Wonderful experience. And I've been back twice every year since then. The next one was the first image that I did for my own fashion publication that I started. It changed names. Originally, it was Shikaro magazine. Now it is Aurelius magazine. And this image was taken in my second trip to Paris. And it showcases my love affair with black and white monochromatic images because of the nice way that I feel like I can use the contrasts of shadows and light. I also wanted to shoot an iconic image of the Eiffel Tower, but just from my own perspective. And I felt like I was able to successfully do that there because it felt like how I dreamed of what a fashion image in Paris should look like. And it also showcases a lot of my traditional method of perspective. I love my models to look like gods. So I like for them to be extremely tall to the point where it's almost like unnaturally tall with their limbs and the angles, because I shoot from what I call a worm's perspective, which means I crouch really low and I shoot up at an angular degree to be able to create that elongated without having to do it in post editing. I'm not a big fan of over using Photoshop too much in my images. Next image is in Luxor in Egypt. And this was an incredible image to me because it wasn't focused on an actual model. It was focused on an actual woman, which is rare in my photography because I prefer utilizing professional fashion models, but this one didn't. I really wanted to learn how to get out of my comfort zone of playing with shadows, to use the shadow to be a character within itself and the light to be a secondary character, and to play with forms as well. Next is my muse from the very beginning, model Milan Dixon, who is extremely successful in her career right now. I love this image because it showcases that fashion photography is not just about the technique you have, but it's also about developing your eye professionally to be able to make even the most familiar locations into something dynamic. This is literally behind my studio in Brooklyn, where we just walked outside because the sunlight was beautiful and I get bored in the studio really quickly. Told her to lay down in the alleyway and just snap this picture and put her on like a $1,500 gown or something. And it helped propel her career, because originally they just thought that she was going to be a commercial lifestyle model. Then they were able to see her through my eyes as a successful fashion model. So that's special to me. Another image of just taking a basic backdrop. This was behind my condo in Miami. No, this was the condo in Puerto Rico. And I didn't want to take beach photos. So I decided to use the sky to be a backdrop of something more dynamic, but to play with deep shadows and to utilize the light to, I wanted the light to complement the shadows in a way that promoted her forward. Also, I just like to play with wind blowing through hair because it just creates a superhero look to it. So she looked really strong to me and had great physique, but it didn't look like a traditional like swimsuit image. This is going into some of my most recent work, which I just did last month. As I was explaining earlier, how I have a new appreciation for color. So going into 2021, my first shoot is the one that you're seeing right now. And it's full of bright colors, and it's interesting because the sky is not as dramatic as I usually like it to be. It was very hazy, but I utilized that to pump the red forward to create a stimulation within the viewer so that when they see it, I wanted their heart to go a little bit faster. And it's softer than a lot of the angles that I use in a lot of my fashion photography. So I wanted to play with delicacy some, because I'm usually having sharp angles, sharp poses, stronger, composed images. Next image is my deep infatuation, with dynamic locations in the world. This was probably one of the most dangerous shots that I believe that I've done. This is over a cliff, and where were we? Aquadea, and I'm totally mispronouncing that, but it's Aquadea in Puerto Rico. They call this the Devil's Hole or the Devil's Mouth, because there are geysers of water that shoot up at random places throughout the cliff. And my model was just like, I'll do whatever you want, I trust you. And I'm like, I'm the wrong guy to tell that to, because I want to create images that people are going to remember. And that means we're going to go into some dangerous situations. So she was literally on this edge of this cliff, and I climbed to the top of the opposing cliff to her and shot down and was able to get like such dynamic energy and spirit with the water, the ocean, and the cliffs. So I was really proud of that image. Sorry about that.
Shamayim,
Okay,
this is
so
where this is where I'm
yeah.
going to jump in. So when you're shooting on a cliff, do you have somebody holding on to you?
No, I work with a very, very small team on those sets. So it's usually just me, my model, and like a makeup artist and a stylist. Like that's it. I was literally like just holding onto a cliff with my right hand and holding the camera with the left hand and just shooting now.
Right. Never let the camera go.
I have one time I was shooting on this was a very long time ago at waterfalls at Anoda. It was a very big waterfall, and I was shooting the model, and my foot slipped and I fell off a waterfall, and I threw my camera up to the model. I was like, I just pray she catches, and she caught it. She didn't want to lose those photos. I survived. The camera survived. The model survived. All is
Great.
well that ends well. But yeah, small team, just holding onto the cliff.
Hmm.
So moving on, this is another one from my recent shoot. This is just another example of my infatuation with form, creating the pyramid that would lead the viewer's gaze up to the nucleus of the image, which is, of course, the model. And in fashion photography, of course, our aim is always to, one, sell the product, but two, not to make it seem like you're trying to sell a product. You're trying to sell an image, a lifestyle, a dream, a culture. So the model Evelyn and I feel like this was a really successful one. Also, I jump around a lot, so bring me back if I just start going off into these tangents about photography.
No problem. You know what? Here's something that I do want to ask you, because you
Yeah.
talk a lot about you're shooting all these wonderful fashion and commercial locations.
Mhm.
Is this coming out of your brain, or is your client, the magazine, whomever your client is, are they saying to you, Shamayim, this is what we're looking for, or are you telling it to them?
I suffer from the same curse that most fashion photographers do. We come into it for the creativity,
Mhm.
to direct our sets and create these visions. But usually you have to get these things approved by like 5 or 6 different people. I'm sure you guys know there's an art director, creative director, editor in chief, fashion editor, and all of them have visions as well. So what I do is I let everyone give me their vision. And then I'm like, okay, if budget was not an object, what would we do? Like if we didn't have to worry about fitting this shoot into like a budget of, let's say, $20,000, how, like, tell me that vision. And then they do, and then I'll just like try to figure out a way to create that under that budget. And I'm really good at it because I spent so many years just traveling the world before I started taking in these jobs. So I know somebody who knows somebody that can get us this or can get us that, and we can create these really elaborate shoots up under the budget. And usually that's what the clients tend to come back to me for. They were like, hey, so we know you did a shoot in Egypt. Can we do another shoot in Egypt, but with different locations? And I'm like, yeah, I know a guy. So, but most of the time it is a collective vision, unless it's something that I just do to set my soul on fire. Because when we're doing commercial work, oftentimes we are limited to the vision of the client. And it, as a creative, you can go dead inside if you're just working for money. So I'll take my own budget and just create these elaborate shoots in these elaborate locations, and not necessarily to get them printed or published, but I need it in order to continue doing what I like to do. And
Right.
none of my clients, excuse me, none of my followers follow me for most of those client jobs.
Mhm.
They're boring. They're absolutely boring. Usually they just want you to go in front of a white wall and shoot something, because they only want, especially in America, because they only, it's so much. Let me think, guide my words. Okay, so in America, it's very commercial based. Everything's about sell, 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 which
Mhm.
is why I love working in Europe, because in Europe, they're more prone to be like, what is your creative vision? What is the story we're trying to tell? And then they try to incorporate that with the actual product. But
Right.
in the United States, it's a little bit different. It's
Right.
mostly sell the product first, and if we have time, be creative.
Right. Right. Right.
Um, Also, if you notice or not, a lot of the work tends to be focused on sky, which is a little tidbit that I'd like to put in there subconsciously, which goes back to my name. It's like a trademark because in Hebrew, my name means sky and heaven. So I'm always concentrating on showing like elaborate scenes of the sky, even if it's just a brilliant blue or if it's really cloudy. I'll shoot in like hurricane season to get like really moody, emotional clouds and things like that. So it's just little bitty things like that that I like to play with to create layers of a narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Next image, Paris, back to my monochromatic, utilizing lights and shadows form to help tell a narrative that I feel like would be more engaging to the viewer. Um, because I spend so much time with my actual client work on commercial stuff, is they don't want the dramatic lighting. They want good, nice, beautiful, clean fill lighting. And so whenever I get to shoot for myself, I like to go full blown with dramatic shadows and lights. And usually that's what people come back to me for and we're like, we love this aspect of your work so much more.
Mm-hmm.
Me, once again, taking those edgy shots of something that people are familiar with that they see probably every time they visit a place, and me trying to give my own interpretation or my own dream of it. This was in, of course, San Juan, Puerto Rico, a place that I shoot at 2-3 times a year. So I know it very, very well. And each time I try to outshoot myself there. But back again, it goes to sky. Then I found out that my name actually means that of two skies, which are heaven, which is the sky, and heaven, which is also the ocean. So I wanted to create a shot that kind of like complemented both of those. And I found like this was a really cool way to show the two heavens, sky and the
Beautiful.
ocean.
So all the places where you've shot, is there a region where the light, you really love the light in this a specific part of the world?
Oh, absolutely. South Africa.
Mm.
The light just hits different down there. Um, the light feels like it's alive. Egypt has a very beautiful lighting as well because it's so much sand that diffuses the sunlight and creates all of these different tones of red and almost like bronze. So the continent of Africa, the sun is just different. But I like to shoot in tropical locations like in the Caribbean because I get dramatic clouds, but I also get like really beautiful cloudless skies like this one right here as well.
Right.
If the cliff model was my most dangerous shot, this is my second most dangerous shot. And I shot this one back early in my career. This was probably my second or third year as a photographer. I was shooting with a really cheap Olympus digital camera. But everyone has asked me my entire career if this was fake. No, it's not. We found a petting zoo on the side of the road in Arizona, in Yuma, Arizona. We were heading to the desert to go shoot, but saw this petting zoo, mom and pop spot, drove through there, and I was just like, hey, can my model shoot with the animals? And they were like, yeah, but it'll cost you. And they literally just charged us like $125. And I was just like, oh my God, really? $125? So yeah, $125 I was able to shoot with this incredible longhorn bull. I forgot the breed of the bull, but they call them Texas Longhorns in Texas. So we were in Arizona, literally jumped over the fence. They told her not to look the bull in the face, to look away. That's why we have this angle. But one of my favorite shots that will probably always be in my personal portfolio, just because I was such a new to photography, didn't know any of the rules, didn't know if there were laws or anything. I just knew it had a story in my head and I just wanted to put it on a
That's
photograph.
great.
We got that one. This was from my first year as a photographer. I did not know studio lighting at the time. I faked it, where I literally had my girlfriend at the time hold a fluorescent light that you put in your garage. She just held it above the model's head and she had to have some good strong arms. I didn't even have a tripod. I used my knee. I put the camera on my knee to keep it steady and shot it against a white wall with the fan blowing. And after I took that photograph, I knew that there was nothing else in the world that was going to satisfy me other than photography. So there's a million mistakes in this image, but I refuse to touch it again because it just represents my first year.
I think it's great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I was able to start my career off of this image for people to actually take me serious. So it holds a special place in my heart. So the next image is a supermodel, Winnie Harlow, who is, when I first started working with her, she had just came off of the show America's Next Top Model and was trying to recreate her brand as an actual respected model, because a lot of people didn't know that the models who were on that show didn't really get respect in the industry. So we were shooting for Ebony magazine at the time, and that was my first time meeting her, and I just thought that she was the most beautiful woman because I had never seen anyone who looked anything like her. So that stimulated me as a creative. And I wanted to photograph her in a different way that any other photographer has. And now she's gone on to become supermodel, and she shoots with all of the legendary photographers in the world. And it's just wonderful to know that I took part in helping rebrand her to be the supermodel that she is. Next image is my first studio shoot after I started seeing in color. With model Tashiko White. Shot it in my studio in New York. Originally, it was in black and white, but I just felt like it lost some of its soul when I converted it. So I presented it in two different versions to the magazine, and they went with both for some reason. They both energetically feel different. And it's a great showcase of how much I'm obsessed with a woman's gaze. It's not when the model looks at the camera, it's when the model, the person, the spirit gazes at another spirit, which is me, which is beyond the camera. It creates a connection. And she had such a powerful gaze to be such soft-spoken. It was like all of the things that she was thinking or wanted to exhibit, she put it in her eyes. So I thought with the composition of the image being so busy with all of this big high fashion stuff, her eyes, her gaze were so strong that I felt like it arrested the attention of the viewer, which I found is really, really spectacular. And next image, back into the studio, but my black and white representation in the studio of two of my favorite models together, Milan Dixon and Samantha Archibald. This image was on showcase at Smithsonian. So I was really, really proud about that because it was my first photography exhibition for such a prestigious museum that had never shown any photographs from a fashion photographer at the African American Museum of the Smithsonian.
How does that happen? How do you suddenly get into the Smithsonian?
The curator contacted Time Magazine after Time Magazine did the article about me. And they asked about my work, and then they contacted my team and said that the director of the museum was interested in showcasing some of the work. So I was just happy. Social media is extremely powerful. And I come across a lot of photographers who are my senior, but they come to my workshops and they were like, I don't know how to do this social media thing. And I was like, you need to go and hire somebody who understands it. If you don't, it's just, we don't want to have to feel like we're slaves to the social media thing, but the examples of fortune that I've received just by practicing consistency through social media created these opportunities with like Time Magazine, with the Smithsonian, with many of the magazines that I shot for. And my manager tells me that, no, it's not 90, it's 80-something% of my clientele first encounter my work through social media. And then they go see my website. So 10 years ago, your website was your landing page.
Right.
Not anymore.
Right.
So that's that.
I mean, after talking with Bobby the other day, I have such a big question for you with regards to social media and everything else, but I want to get through all your images first. Sure. Otherwise, we'll talk forever.
I'm down for it. Okay. more form, structure. This is one of my favorite images from my followers. Not my personal favorite, but my followers on Instagram. They love it. They were like, hey, talk about the picture of Rania and the leopard. And I was like, sure, okay, I'll toss that one in there. Form, create all of my models that I'm shooting. I'm just trying to replicate images from comic books also, because I'm obsessed with comic books. So the women look powerful and strong and tall and edgy, and their clothes are not at all what most women or men would walk around with, because this is all fantasy. And that's why I love fashion photography so much, because we're able to create images that are not necessarily representative of real life, but of dreams. This is from the 2015 Ebony magazine cover that took me to another degree with my career, because it was Ebony magazine's highest selling issue after their Barack Obama cover. And the first time that they ever put fashion models on the cover of their magazine. And they brought me in because they came across my work on Instagram. And these were supposed to be the top Black models of that year. All of them have gone on to become supermodels in their own right. So that was very special. We were on MSNBC, Fox News, all kinds of things because of this cover, because it went viral on the internet. So that was a wonderful experience in getting my work out there. This next image is from that same editorial with Ebony. Same with this image of Winnie Harlow, same editorial for Ebony magazine. Next is Milan Dixon again. First time shooting with, getting the rights to shoot archived collection from Alexander McQueen. So that's very, very special for me, because he had passed and most of his garments were locked away in museums and archives. And I was granted access to actually photograph some of his pieces. So that was extremely special for me. I was inspired by a scene from the movie 300 where they had the oracles, and the oracles were like flying around in these white gowns. And I was like, I need to do that, but I need to do my version of it. And I want Alexander McQueen. So we were able to do that with an incredible team. This image was my first beauty campaign. Wonderful model from Ethiopia. Very special to me because I always wanted to shoot beauty campaigns, but I did not think that my retouching was to par. So I never like submitted for it. And I got over that fear, submitted, and it was published. And then I started booking beauty campaigns after it, which was wonderful. These next two images are back in the studio, two Brazilian models who I love dearly. And it was just showcasing form, function, my studio, traditional lighting. They were very popular on my Instagram. So of course they asked me to go over these, but these are just basically, as I said before, my love affair with black and white, with textures, love shooting high fashion that has great compatibility with my style of lighting. Love shooting Brazilian women because they represent such a wide spectrum of different ethnicities as well. Same editorial. So that's the collection that I put together for you guys.
Beautiful. I'm going to applaud for everybody. So,
I appreciate
that's
it.
beautiful. All right, so I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you the big question that I've been meaning to talk to you about,
Sure.
which I find so fascinating. Hopefully I'm not the only one. Is that your name is Shamayim, and you've created a brand around your name. And you've talked about social media and Instagram and so forth. And then in speaking with Bobby the other day, he told me how important it is for you to put business first, and the creative second. I would love to talk to you about that. I'm so curious about how you created this mindset. And how that has created or helped forge your success.
Okay, so I never wanted to be a starving artist. Like that doesn't interest me. There's nothing romantic about that. I did not just want to photograph the dreams and the lifestyle of luxury and all of that and be like a a viewer of it. I wanted to live it. And so my educational background is not photography. I was self-taught. I don't like to say self-taught, but it technically is. I studied up under Helmut Newton to me. I studied his work, like
Yeah.
worshipped his work, his lights and his shadows.
Likewise.
To if I could do a seance and speak to his spirit, I would. Especially now in the generation that we are at right now, where Helmut Newton would never survive right now. If you're familiar with his work, then you understand what I mean. But the freedom that he had to just be able to create, I crave that. Right. We can't now, but I lived through Helmut Newton's work. But my educational background was in advertising and marketing. So I went to school to learn how to take a concept and to make it profitable by increasing its value within the marketplace. And I just took that education to fashion photography. So when my clients hire me, I'm not just coming to them right now with 16, 17 years of experience as a photographer. I'm also coming to them with an additional 7 years of studying how to make their brand more profitable by creating images that are visually stimulating to the viewer and not just something that they can see and discard, like a lot of the commercial products that we see. And we do that by creating an emotional attachment or an emotional bond between the concept or the story or the narrative of the image with that whom is viewing it. There's what maybe no women look like the women in my pictures. Even the models that I'm photographing, they don't look like that. This is fantasy. And so if you understand that and you don't try to hide away from it because you're like, oh, well, real women don't look like this. Well, there's a real woman in this photograph, you know? But I need to make it in a way to where I'm not trying to compare real life to a fantasy. So it is exaggerated and we don't hold back from that. To me, perfect marketing was the Gucci campaigns of the early 2000s where they were extremely controversial, but you remembered them. They almost took it over the edge. But all of that is part of branding and marketing, which I feel like we get away from a lot. So no, I cannot have something as controversial as a woman sitting there with some Gucci underwear on with her pubic hair like literally shaved into a Gucci G like they did while a guy was on his knees in front of her, and that actually ran as a campaign. There's another way to visually stimulate your viewer by creating dynamic locations. Instead of shooting straight on, I shoot at these low angles to where the viewer has to look up and like, wow, she's tall. No, it's just playing with perspectives and things like that because I want you to remember the image. The black and whites, they're classic. I wanted to be like in 30 years, you still pull up that image and it still resonates with you. Because sometimes I feel like when we shoot in color, it can become dated because we're using digital formats. And I feel like our natural eyes still have not adjusted to the fact that we're looking at a digital image. Film just felt more real for some reason. So I take that know-how of business and I present that to the meetings with my clients before, and they're usually never prepared for a photographer to start speaking in terms of business and commerce. And I feel like that gives me a competitive edge as well. And I teach these same business tools to my photographers in my classes and in my courses, because I'm like, you can learn any of my lighting stuff on YouTube for free. Don't pay me for that. Please don't. Like, go watch a YouTube video. Right. Let me tell you some stuff that you can't find on YouTube. Let me talk to you about licensing and how you make most of your money off of licensing and don't give it away, because I lost like almost $45,000 one time with a client because I didn't know anything about licensing and I didn't have an agent. So learn from my mistakes, but you learn that when you focus on the business. Right. And so when I first started working in New York, I was very, very, very broke. Like most people when they first get to New York, I slept in my car outside of a studio. All my money went towards this little bitty studio in Dumbo before it was cool. For Dumbo, it was cool. It was like still old artist Dumbo. And I knew I was like, I don't like being poor. I don't like having to go next door to the hotel and speaking to the people at the front desk, convincing them to let me use the shower because the studio didn't have a shower. I was like, I don't ever want to be here again. And so you look at money differently. You're like, I paid $60,000 for this degree for me to be sleeping in a car? No. So it makes you readjust to like how you handle your business. And you see your social media not as a portfolio, but you see it as an actual branding and marketing opportunity.
That's
To
fascinating.
reach out and touch people, get good quality feedback directly from your viewers to see what works, what doesn't work. Because a lot of times we become infatuated with our own work and we don't see where we can grow.
Mhm.
Social media, you have thousands of people sitting up there and being like, you keep shooting the same thing over and over again. And I'm like, oh crap, I do. So you get that good natural feedback as well.
Right, right. That's great. And yet that brings me to something that I found fascinating on your website, in that you have photographers and you do teach classes.
Yeah.
And there's so many people, photographers who, they have a technique,
Mm-hmm.
and that technique becomes the brand, and they don't necessarily want to share that technique because it's very specific to them.
Sure.
How do you light? Well, I have a very specific way, or I've created my own kind of soft boxes, or I'm doing whatever I'm doing, and I'm not going to tell you. But you open it wide. You keep it wide open.
Yeah. When it comes to that, there's enough work out here for everybody. Like I tell everybody, like, there's so much work out here. I can't possibly do it all. And originally, when I used to do my expeditions, the expeditions are basically where I take makeup artists, hairstylists, and models, and we travel to these exotic locations just to create for our portfolios, to keep us sharp and keep new work. And I didn't have photographers joining. And then one day I realized, like, I'm tired of just traveling with models. And I know to young photographers, it sounds like the dream. It's really not the dream. Like, especially when you get a certain age, you can't even relate to your models. And you just be like, oh, okay, cool. Your music sucks. But I was like, I wanted to start traveling with like-minded individuals.
Mhm.
And I was like, I've been to so many of these locations so many times. I was like, I want to share it. And so I started bringing in these younger photographers on these expeditions, guys who would have never shot with professional models, never shot outside of their hometown. And to be able to see them, see the places that I've been to under new eyes. I started seeing the places with new eyes again because I was seeing it through their eyes for the first time. And it made me a better photographer to be able to sit there after the shoot, because my favorite time of these trips are after the shoot, when we're all at dinner at a table and we can talk and I can hear these photographers' stories. And I'm like, they're just looking at me like I'm successful. And I'm like, really? What's success though? Like, I'm chasing Ghost. I'm chasing Helmut Newton. I will never get as good as Helmut Newton because he's dead. So of course I'm going to glorify him. And I was just like, find you a target you can't reach. Stop trying to compare yourself to your peers. We're not in competition with each other personally, but we are in competition with each other professionally. I want my students to shoot the same model that I shot in the same location and it blow my shot out of the
Right.
Oh, because I'm very competitive. I want you to beat me because I get off on it. When I see you did an excellent job, it makes me want to shoot more. It makes me feel like I'm like 20 all over again and I'm hungry. And I feel like if we look at each other as competition, we lose so much from just connecting with each other, learning how to see light differently, learning how to see shadows differently. And like these guys they're getting in here younger and younger, and their moms and dads have great credit. They can go get them a Canon 5D Mark IV when they're like 18. So by the time they come and see me, they're 25. They've been shooting for a while now with their camera, and I'm just blown away by what they can do. But I'm like, you know how to use your camera, but do you know how to see?
Right.
Let me teach you how to see, because that's what you're going to get hired for. Everybody has the same camera. I don't care. Sony, Nikon, Hasselblad, it don't matter. They all do the same thing. How we see is what differentiates us. So even though my students are like right next to me and I will give them the exact same settings I have on my camera, it's not trade secrets. Everybody knows it's just numbers, digits in a machine. I know they can never replicate how I see the world though.
Right.
So equipment, gear, technique, all of that is nothing. They can
So,
never replicate the soul.
so move, so from how you see into actually how you tell a story, because I love the fact that you kept on referring to yourself as the story that you're trying to tell, the story that you're trying to tell. How did that start from the very beginning, or did you gravitate from someone who is capturing a still image to something that you could actually, that is multi-layered, that has a story based into it?
I've always been obsessed with narrative.
Mhm.
I'm a movie buff. What do they call them? Cinephiles. Uh,
Yes, yeah.
yeah. So if it's not me trying to recreate my comic books, I'm trying to recreate movies that I created in my head in still shots. Trying to photograph the women of these dreams and these movies that I have playing in my head. Um, and I feel like that's part of how I see
Mhm.
cinematically. So when I have a client and the client is like trying to dumb me down, I feel like because they don't want it cinematic, they just want to take a picture of their pretty dress.
Sure.
I feel like it's anchored my creativity. I've learned over time how to deal with it. And just your client comes first, their desires
Mhm.
come first. I'll always shoot what the client wants, but then I'll go right behind them and shoot my version of it, and then I'll give them both versions. And sometimes they'll go with my version. They're like, "Oh wow, I didn't even see it like this." But most of the time they go with their version.
Right.
But it's just a give and pull, ebb and a flow between you and the client. But it's all about narrative to me, because that's why I chose fashion photography over any other branch of photography,
Mhm.
because fashion photography allowed me to tell the narratives that were in my mind. Being able to photograph these beautiful black and brown women in narratives that most of the world's never seen before. It's like when I was in the Dominican Republic for the very first time and I was looking at the billboards and I was like, none of the women who live on this island look like the women on these billboards. And
Mhm.
so I remember being at a restaurant and I saw this beautiful little 17-year-old waitress come up to me. And I'm like, this girl used to be a model. And like she comes on, I was like, you're so beautiful. And I'm like, I'm not trying to flirt with you, but I'm a photographer. Here's my work. Like, I'm not the creep. You're just beautiful. You should think about modeling. She was like, no, I could never. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, you're like, damn, 5'11", like size 2 and young. You ain't got no bumps on your face. I was like, you fit into all of these clothes. And she was like, no, no, I'm not beautiful. I'm not pretty. And I'm like, are you insane? But she had never seen images of women that look like her in that
Mhm.
way. So I pull out
That's
my
awesome.
iPad and I started going through the pictures that I took. I was like, you look like this model right here. And she was like, ooh, she's Dominican like me. And I was like, yes. So that creates a different drive to create these stories,
Right. Right.
to be able to showcase the world is so full of just variety of beauty, all types of shapes and sizes and colors. Like, I go to Japan, I don't want to shoot a black girl in Japan. I want to shoot me a Japanese model in Japan. And I want to travel to Italy and I want a beautiful Italian model. Like, we have a plethora of just different types of medium to play with fashion photography, and to be able to tell all of these different stories that represent all of these type of men and women from any background. And I feel like that's the most important thing that fashion photography can do.
That's great. Before I occupy all your time, which I could easily do, I just want to tell everybody in the audience that if you chat in your questions, I will read your questions out loud, and then we can go and give them directly to Shemayim, and he will answer them. So I think everybody has access to the chat, so you guys can go crazy. And so while people are doing that and they're starting to type, the question that I'm going to ask you is, when you were discovered by Time Magazine and you were singled out as a photographer to watch,
Yeah.
where were you in your career when that happened?
I was at year 10.
Year 10. And were you working steadily, or or was there something that had happened, or how did that affect you and your life at that point?
Um, this goes back to Napoleon Hill, and if the author Napoleon Hill. And
Yes.
okay,
You Can
so
Grow Rich.
yes,
Yes.
where it says that it takes 10 years of mastery.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm like living proof of that. Before that 10-year, I was working, but it was mostly like independent brands contacting me, some smaller local magazines, nothing, nothing that I believe that would stand out to where anybody would recognize it. When the Time magazine thing hit, um, things literally launched. Because some people can feel like you're as talented as, like, super talented, but if you don't, and I hate to say it, but in the United States, if you don't have the backing or credentials, they're not about to pay you.
Mm-hmm.
Not what you're worth. So that helped substantially, because right after the Time Magazine thing, it was Time Magazine, Smithsonian, Ebony, MSNBC, Fox News, like, just, it literally was just, and it's been consistent ever since.
Wow, that's fantastic. All right, so we have a question from Daryl, who asks, would you talk about the process of dealing with various stylists to help bring your vision to life?
Yeah, that's a hunt that I have been on for the duration of my career. I feel as though most people think it's a wardrobe stylist that they should be attracting. It's actually it's not the stylist that you need. It's mostly you need a producer. And I think in terms of film instead of photography, so it gets mixed up a little bit. But a producer is someone who puts all of the visions together and helps orchestrate them.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the times as photographers, especially new photographers, they think that they have to do all of that themselves. And you do in the beginning, but once you have like a, what do we call them in photography? Editor.
Mm-hmm.
Go film, I'm thinking producer. Your editor comes in and they match you with the best stylist for your vision.
Mm-hmm.
So what I found was that when I was just trying to work with as many stylists as possible, because once again, this goes back to the business side of my mind. It was like, the more stylists I work with, the more clothes I get to work with, the more clothes I get to work with, the more brands that I have photographed.
Right.
Because every time I post a new image on my Instagram, I can tag all the 5 designers that were in that photograph. Each one of them are 5 potential new clients for me. So I like to work with stylists who have great connections with designers and showrooms, because I want these designers to see my rendition of their pieces so that they can come back to me and was like, no one has ever seen my gown the way you do. And they hire me for their lookbook or for their campaign.
Right.
It's just part of my strategy. So that's why I believe in the importance of wardrobe stylists. How you get these wardrobe stylists? I don't believe in chasing anything professionally or personally. Rather, that's the model you want to work with, the agency you want to work with, the clients. I don't believe in chasing any of them. I believe in attracting all of them to you. And you attract them by putting yourself and your work in vibration with the quality of people that you want to bring into your life. If you want to work with really great wardrobe stylists, start shooting clothes instead of models. A lot of times, new fashion photographers, they get obsessed with shooting the model, with photographing the model, because she's pretty or he's pretty, and or the location. And I'm like, that's what models don't hire us.
Right.
Designers do.
Right.
Back when I did not have any connections with any stylists or anything like that, I would go take my credit card, go to Nordstrom or Neiman Marcus where they had a really good return policy, and I would go and buy a Versace something.
Uh-huh.
I can only buy one, so I'm going to buy like a blazer, and I could like switch it out, and I would go and return it after the shoot.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how I started implementing those really high-end brands into my work. And the stylists would see that and they would think that it was professionally styled. And they were like, oh my God, I love that. And I'm just like, yeah, we had access to the Versace showroom. And they were like, no, you didn't. It's off season. And then they would teach me about off season and stuff like that. And the stylists.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, stylists are very important, but go and find yourself a great editor first.
Fantastic. Okay, then we have Brandon says, he asks, you talked about Helmut Newton as an influence in your work. Are
Yeah.
there any other photographers that have influenced you in the fashion genre?
100%. My holy trinity is Helmut Newton, Peter Lemberg, and Mark Marcus.
Hmm.
The photography duo. Love them. Current that I've been following, I probably going to slaughter his name, and this sucks because people always slaughter my name. I think it's Zima, TXYM.
Oh, that's I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
His work is phenomenal.
really great.
His usage of color is what got me, because he sees color in a way that I don't. and I'm still studying his work, trying to figure out how he's able to get some of the things that he gets, which is how I choose my photographers. When
Right.
they photograph images to where I'm sitting here trying to figure it out. Because I'm like, wait, was Photoshop around when Helmut Newton first started? How did he get that?
No.
Like, and I'm sure it was, but it's just like, I like escapism.
Mhm.
I like to see a fashion image that makes me dream.
Right.
And if the photography doesn't do that for me and it just feels commercial, I'm just feel like you're trying to sell me something.
Right. Right.
But yeah, those are definitely my photographers.
Great.
There are others, but
I'm sure. So I love the fact that you, in your conversation about commercial photography and your clients,
Yeah.
what's flashing into my mind is that when you're on location and you're on a cliff somewhere,
Yeah.
you do not have your client hovering around a monitor whatsoever. You don't have a sea of people from Ebony Magazine hanging around a monitor. Does that happen for you when you're in studio? And what happens when you're on location? How tight a rein does your client have?
It really just depends on the publication. The smaller, more independent publications, they let you just do your thing. They just want the image. But when I was like working with some of the larger brands like Elle Magazine or with like Vogue, they have their production.
Right,
Like
right.
I don't come on set like I'm Shamayim. Like you literally are, hey, I'm just happy to be here. My guys, I'm gonna come here and do my job. Like they have everything set up. Like they have the budget for that though.
Right.
And I feel like it slows me down when I have a teeter table like sitting there for my camera. I can't move the way I like to move.
Mhm.
And I like to get down on the ground and like
Sure.
all this kind of stuff. On location, I will just tell them, let me get my shot. Then my assistant will run this memory card back over to you. You can plug it in and you can look at it while I keep shooting. But in studio, I'm just now accustomed and used to corporate being behind me with their monitors.
Right.
And I actually kind of like it. It kind of makes you a sharper photographer.
Mm.
You can't hide behind post editing, retouching, and things like that. They're seeing if you're good, if you're worth the money live right there. So I actually prefer it in studio. I still feel like it's like a chain because I still want to move around and all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, most of the time there's monitors there for clients. When I'm shooting for myself or shooting editorial for like submission or something like that, no chains on me.
Got it. Beautiful. So Jason, thank you. Texima Yesta?
Yes, that's it.
Texima Yesta. I'm assuming I could be completely destroying the name, but
You'll be
yes.
both.
Yes. Okay. Very good. So I understand you're in Miami right now,
Yeah,
and I also understand that Miami doesn't know what COVID is at the moment. Is
they
that
do not.
true?
They do not.
They have no
Like
idea.
it's the wild west out here for COVID-19. Like where people actually are like looking at you suspicious for wearing a mask.
Uh,
And I cannot risk that because of my clients. Most of my clients, they have a COVID center right there on set. We walk into this little room, we get our COVID test before we can even get around anybody else.
mhm.
But not all of my clients have the budget for that.
Right.
So I cannot afford to not work.
Right. Yeah,
So
of course.
yeah, I allow Miami to be as crazy as they want to be. I stay strapped up with a mask, and it's not a political thing to me. It's a health thing. I got a mom and a dad who I do not want sick at all, and I
Right.
don't want my clients sick. So, but yeah, Miami's crazy.
So what do you have to do in order to prepare for a shoot in this world of COVID?
Well, things really haven't shifted that much for me, other than the constant of having something prodded up my nose.
Mhm.
That's only, I guess, why I got out of LA. LA
Right.
got shut down really hard.
Mhm.
And it was affecting clients left and right. They just started leaving LA in like droves. And they were like, we're moving to Vegas to shoot, or we're going to Texas to shoot. And then I saw that a lot of them were going to Miami. And I was just like, oh, well, it's an excuse for me to go back home to Miami. So yeah, I just came back here for that because a lot of my clients came back out here and the weather. So yeah.
So is it hard to get a client or models to actually travel to you in Miami, or using all local resources, or how's that working out?
No, actually today I just picked up one of my models from the airport. We flew her in from Los Angeles.
Mhm.
So no, that's been pretty easy. And I've just gotten to know a lot of the COVID centers really well here. So I just send my models right over there the day before we go into production, things like that. So
Right.
no, we've been dead this now for a year almost,
Mhm.
the whole pandemic thing. So now things have started to become formulaic, and we have a process now. So things are good. I have my assistants wiping down all the equipment, all of that good stuff. It's become routine.
Right. Right. In speaking with Bobby the other day, I
Mhm.
learned that in 2020 there was sort of a image shift. So there was a lot. It was a lot hotter to have models of color. The
Mhm.
BLM movement.
Yeah.
Um, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Okay. So everybody likes to complain about 2020, but my team and we got a lot of work in 2020. A lot of work. I am so grateful for that. I feel for everybody who was affected horribly and negatively by COVID. But the Black Lives Matter movement hit, and all of a sudden, the clients that I've been working for years, all of a sudden wanted my face on everything. So that was a great publicity because they wanted to show, hey, we've had a Black photographer the whole time. And I was like, sure, guys. Okay, cool. I'm not going to turn it down. But it was wonderful to be able to see models who I developed early in their career, Black models, Latina models, multiracial models. All of a sudden, they were not working for years.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, they were booking. Where I was contacting them like, hey, just checking on you. Everything's good, COVID. And they were like, I've been working every day. And I was like, I don't know how long this is going to last, but we're going to be with it. So yeah, it's been wonderful. But also within the shift of that, I also started to notice that there was also a shift more not just towards working with Black creatives, but a lot of corporations wanted to show diversity all around. So
Mhm.
I was starting to like lose jobs that I was like on hold for because the client would find out that I wasn't female. And
Mhm.
they would literally directly tell me, they were like, we needed a female photographer. And I was like, oh,
Right.
okay. And then I was like, that's a one thing. But then it was like 3 times. And I was just like, oh crap, this is a thing. So before I was feeling like I lost a lot of jobs because I was a Black photographer. They thought I was Jewish at first. And then they would meet me on set and they were like, hey, so are you Shamayim's assistant? And I'm like, yeah, I'm the assistant. And then like they would later find out like, oh crap, he's not like a middle-aged Jewish guy. No. And then I like showed them my family ring with all like the Hebrew writing on it and stuff. And they were like, oh. And then at the time I had like a full beard coming from Williamsburg. And they were like, oh. So that was awkward. And then so like I'm used to like losing jobs for different kinds of reasons and stuff like that. But 2020, I didn't have that other than the fact that I wasn't female.
Mm.
So yeah, there has been a shift. I believe that it's going to be a shift that is, it's not going to be as strong as it was in 2020. They're going to mix it up now more though. I do feel like the industry now has opened up more to the, I want to make sure I get the letters right,
LGBTQ.
LGBTQ
Yeah.
community. I saw that that has opened up a lot more,
Mm.
which is healthy. More Latinos, more Asians, more Indians. And I started seeing more white photographers who I really respected starting to shoot more diversity,
Mm.
and seeing how they see Black women or how they see brown women was really entertaining to me because I was just like, oh, so you guys do know how to shoot different tones. Okay, great. Wonderful, guys. Welcome, welcome. And it just made lunch meetings with different photographers so much more interesting because I was starting to hear why they never did before.
Right.
Because I don't judge people until I hear their story. And so it's just hearing the industry talk about how the numbers weren't adding up as to if we hired a Black model, we wouldn't sell as much. And I'm like, well, show me those numbers. And
Mhm.
they couldn't. And I thought that was interesting. And then all of a sudden, everything just got mixed into a blender in 2020. And here we are.
Yeah. Yeah. I lost out a directing job many years ago, not too many years ago, about 3 years ago, because I wasn't a woman. So that was an interesting thing. So you've brought your parents up a couple times. What's your parents think about your career and Time Magazine and Smithsonian and everything else that you've accomplished so far?
Like most creatives, um, our parents don't think we have real jobs until you get the recognition of something that they've heard of. Like I had shot for many clients in magazines. None of my family cared about any of that stuff until Time Magazine. Then all of a sudden, like they know Time Magazine, they know Vogue, like they know all of this kind of stuff. So that's what like it became really real to them. But my family has always been extremely super supportive. But it wasn't a real job until like 10 years into it. Then it became a real job to them.
Where are they? Are they in Miami or where's your family?
No, family's based in Atlanta.
Oh, so you're all over the country.
Yeah.
Got it. I got it. I am going to open it up or hand it off to Jason or Brandon. We're at about, you guys tell me if you want me to keep on going or how, because I could keep on going, believe me.
Yeah, that's totally fine. We're not seeing too many questions showing up in the chat. So at this point, I think if anybody does have a question, please just go ahead and just unmute yourselves, say your first name so we know who we're talking to, and go ahead and ask your question. Otherwise, we can wrap it up for the night if everybody's feeling, feeling like we covered everything.
Well, yeah, I'll tell you what, I'll keep on talking to give people a moment to let them think about their next question, since we have a couple minutes. And all right, so in your downtime, if there is such a thing with downtime, do you have like a go-to escape with a go-to camera that you leave your cell phone at home and you run off to go and unwind, or you just don't believe in downtime at this point?
I believe that I manifested a lifestyle that I don't need escapism from. Last time I actually was physically sick was when I took my family on vacation, and that was the first time I put my camera up. Like I didn't even take the camera, and I got sick.
Oh, got it.
I wanted to shoot so bad.
Yeah.
I mean, the sky was gorgeous, the lighting was gorgeous. I physically got sick, and my family was just like, "Okay, he can't do this again." So now, whenever I travel, even if it's supposed to be for downtime, I always take a model and a bag of clothes. One of my friends that's a model, I have to. Like, I can't escape it. Like this, I built my life around it because I enjoy it, not just the professional part of it, but it's just a part of who I am.
Beautiful.
I can't see a life without it.
I agree. I always keep a camera close. So Daryl asks, can you speak about your magazine?
Yeah, so Aurelius Magazine was created because when I was shooting for other magazines, I felt limited. And I wanted to create a publication. This is my third publication. I created it to be an outlet for photographers and independent designers who could not afford to get in those big magazines. 'Cause a lot of people don't understand those magazines are super political. People pay a lot of money to be featured in one of those editorials. It's not like a stylist just goes and pulls your clothes because they like them. Your brand pays for advertising in that magazine, so they feature your clothes in their editorials. It's very limiting. And also there started being so many agendas for the magazines that I was shooting for, like things that they were telling us that we couldn't do or that we had to do. And I was just like, this has nothing to do with fashion nor photography. Like, this is like political. And I'm like, it felt uncomfortable. And then a very, very prestigious magazine in Paris asked me to shoot something that I spiritually was just against. It was just like a girl covered in goat's blood and standing in a pentagram holding up a goat's head. And I was just like, there's not even any clothes in this photo. So I was just like, oh, okay, I got to create an outlet to where I'm able to create the images that keep me up at night and get it on newsstands, which I did. We're on newsstands now in 7 different countries, all of the major fashion markets, because I wanted independent photographers to have the opportunity to have their first cover and it be printed on a physical newsstand where somebody could walk by, see their work, pick it up. and for them not to feel like they have to tone their craft down to sell clothes.
Right.
So that's why I created Aurelius. And I named it Aurelius Magazine because when I do have children, I wanted my son's middle name to be Aurelius because I'm just obsessed with like Marcus Aurelius.
So this
Caesar.
is your, so in the meantime, this is your child.
It is.
This is your child. Yeah, very nice. So Aaron Davis says, going back to social media, do you think Instagram is the best platform for photographers, or are there other helpful places to get eyeballs on your work?
All of them. I say go for all of them. But Instagram has been it for me.
Mhm.
It's worked phenomenally for me. So that's why I speak so highly about it. But they always change. These social media platforms, when I first started, it was MySpace, Model Mayhem. I don't even know if that's still around. But little outlets like that. And then it changed to Facebook, and now we're here at Instagram. So it's always going to change. YouTube is still powerful because I do elaborate behind the scene videos of all of my shoots, and I place them on YouTube so that photographers can see, look, I'm not shooting with like a $60,000 camera and lens.
Mhm.
I'm shooting with the same camera you're probably shooting with. I want you to see that the process is nowhere near as difficult as these photographers are making it out to seem. All you need is one light. That's why I show that in these videos. All you need to do is
Sure.
know how to, one, be a director before you're a photographer. Because if you're a photographer, you just know how to take a picture, but a director knows how to get things out of their model, out of their team, out of the makeup artist, how to direct an entire set to create a narrative. And I show that on the YouTube channel. So that's a very powerful social media outlet as well.
Right. I remember seeing something on Helmut Newton, since you brought Helmut Newton up, and
The one that his wife did.
I'm a huge fan of Helmut Newton as well.
Yeah.
But I remember him talking about the fact that when he first started, he didn't know that you weren't supposed to shoot at 12 o'clock in the afternoon as well.
Right.
And he would just go out and take his models and go to a place and shoot at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and he
Yep.
made it work. He certainly
Yep.
made it work. So yes.
I saw he did a shoot with a flashlight, and that just set my soul on fire. His
Yeah,
assistant literally had a flashlight over the model's face, and he was like, and it was for Vogue. He was like with this little handheld camera that like probably cost maybe like $75 secondhand, and he was just like pop, pop. Yeah,
It's quite amazing.
Yep.
So Johan von Evil says, he wants to know about your big break. Did you have you mentioned something earlier. Did you have a particular big break, or was there, I mean, outside of your Time magazine, when you said life completely changed, was something before that when people really started taking notice of your work?
Sure. My first trip to Egypt.
Right.
Because I was the first fashion photographer that shot in front of the pyramids in that decade.
Oh, fantastic.
So I didn't know that
Right.
at the time. It was just my dream. Like your bucket list of shoots.
Yeah.
And so when I did it and I came and I released the images, I started getting all of these different like proposals for jobs because clients are like, how do you get access to these places? And I'm like, well, first of all, it's literally just me, like 3-4 people. Like I don't carry a whole crew around, and I don't set up all these lights everywhere. And I never even use strobes or anything on location, or I don't even use a reflector on location. So I'm able to get into these places and everybody just thinks I'm an amateur. Because now Instagram is such a big thing, they just think I'm taking pictures of an influencer, and I'm able to get away with a lot of stuff that way.
Right.
So
that's great. That's great. What is because you said you don't do Photoshop, or very little Photoshop. Do you have a post-production process?
I do. Thing is, it's like I actually have a visual communication degree for graphic web design. So I professionally learned how to do retouching. And the one thing that our professor really drilled into us was like, the mark of a great retoucher is the viewer did not know that you were there.
Right.
Which is like the opposite of how you see a lot of work right now, especially in the US. It's like, to me, they Photoshop the soul out of the subject. where it looks plastic, it looks fake. Nobody looks like that. There's no pores, there's no breath.
Right.
And so I like to go in and take care of everything that I could not do in the camera.
Mm.
I want to first get it in the camera because the photographers who I admired, they were shooting with film and they had to get it in camera.
Right.
And I didn't learn until very recently that they were actually using post editing. One of my assistants broke it down to me. They were like, they were doing dodge and burn back in the 70s. I was like,
Oh, yeah.
I thought they were doing all of that like in the camera. Like, so you just kind of like knock down my high. Well, yeah. So like, I want to get it in camera as much as possible because I want it to be, even though they are fantasy, I still want it based in reality. Like my favorite film director, Christopher Nolan, how you don't really see the special effects.
Mm-hmm.
They're there, but they're done so seamless that you don't notice them. So it doesn't take you out of the film. The same thing is with photography. Like if you have a light hand with it, it doesn't take the viewer out of the image. They still feel like it's a real image of a real person in a real place.
Right. Great. Yeah, back in the day, in film, it's if you have a good printer, you stay with that printer for a very long time because
Still do.
Yeah.
Had mine for 11 years.
Yes. Good. All right, Brandon, Jason, should I hand it back to you?
Yeah, actually, Zadie had one more question. Zadie, do you want to unmute yourself, ask your question, and that'll be the last one for the presentation for tonight?
Zadie, you want to ask, or should I jump in? I'm going to jump in really quick. I don't know.
You already asked it.
I think it was the post-production.
Oh, the post-production question.
Oh, there it was. That's my mistake. I'm so sorry. Yeah.
Got it.
All right, well then, yeah, that wraps it up.
So Shamayim, this has been awesome for me, by the way. I had such a great time. You're a joy to talk with, and not to mention your work is outstanding. But if everybody wants to stick around for the next 5 hours, we're just going to hang out and talk. No, I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. So it's great. I'm going to follow you on all your social medias, and which is really, really wonderful. So thank you. All right, guys, it's all yours.
Yeah, Shamayim, thank you. Todd, thank you too.
Hey, my pleasure. It was an honor.
Yeah, and of course, Jason, everyone here, thank you. Shamayim, your studio manager, Bobby's been great too, so make sure to thank him.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's been terrific. Such a great help.
Great. My investment is going to work.
You're inspiring me to go to South Africa too, about that beautiful light.
Oh my God, please do. It's the most beautiful country.
I gotta go, yeah.
Absolutely.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.